Right. Well, welcome, Kate, to our Toolkit Tuesday. This Toolkit Tuesday topic is the AT, or the Assistive Technology Consideration Process. All right. So just a bit about our organization, Knowbility, before we move forward with our Toolkit Tuesday. What you are attending today is part of our community programs. We are a nonprofit, so we do put on educational and training programs for different sectors of the community. We have the Accessibility Internet Rally, which is a design competition for aspiring accessibility professionals or professionals who want to gain accessibility skills. So we pair them with nonprofits to help them achieve their digital accessibility goals. We have our Access U conference, which is coming up in May. That's more for industry professionals who want advanced training in accessibility. And then, of course, our K-12 digital accessibility, which is why we are here. We have our Toolkit Tuesdays, which is this event free for parents, educators, anyone who wants to learn more about digital accessibility in K-12. And then we also have our K-12 Access Summit, which is our conference for people in K-12, parents and educators, and that will be in the summer. And because we are a nonprofit, we want to bring as many things as we can to the public for free, but of course that costs money. So we do take donations gladly. If you feel so moved to donate, you can visit us at Knowbility, that's knowbility.org/donate to support us and help us bring you more Toolkit Tuesdays. All right, and our presenter. So I am a guest presenter because our speaker today usually introduces people, and that just wouldn't be fair to have her do everything. So I get to introduce Jessica McKay, which I'm very excited to do so. I get to see her all the time, but not everyone else gets to hang out with her. So you guys are going to have a great time today listening to her talk about assistive technology considerations. Jessica, before she came to us at Knowbility, she spent 13 years as an assistive technology specialist for SLEDA ISD in El Paso, Texas. She's also served as an advisory board member for the National Accessible Educational Materials Center, the Center for Inclusive Technology and Education Systems, and State Leaders of Assistive Technology and Education. And she's recently received her Master's of Science in Assistive Technology and Human Services from CSU Northridge, Cal State University Northridge.
All right, thank you, Erica, and thank you everyone for joining us. I think I put in the chat after everyone joined us, we do have a bit.ly, and that is bit.ly/3, then it'll be a capital G, then a lowercase g, C-O-N, and then a capital D. And that'll just take you to a text-based handout of the slides that we have for today. And then I might edit it a little bit, and then we'll make sure we have anything updated onto our website with the recording as well. So welcome, I'm very excited. I love to geek out talking about assistive technology, especially assistive technology in schools, because that is kind of where I started my accessibility journey. So we are going to talk specifically to the AT consideration process. We're going to start by talking about what AT looks like in schools and really looking at it from the perspective of what IDEA says, what the law says. Then we're going to talk about the struggles that schools might be facing with that. And then, of course, talk about some best practices, what research tells us to do. And then lastly, of course, we want to make sure we have some time for anybody if they have questions. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to talk about AT in schools, again, looking at the definitions, the laws, and the purpose. Now, this sounds really boring, I know, but one of the things I find when I'm working with campuses in in their AT consideration process is a lot of times they want to jump ahead to like, what's the tech, what's the tools, what do I need to do? And it really does help if you step back and think about the purpose of what assistive technology is, and even to go back and think about what the purpose of an IEP is, right? That individualized education program. So that's what we want to do, because once you have good foundation and understanding of those, it really does help guide you in that process forward. So we're going to talk about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. It did start in 1975, as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. And really before this law, very, very few students with disabilities were given access to education in any kind of formalized way to ensure that they were getting any kind of education. So that's where it started in 75. Then in 1990, during its reauthorization, it was changed to the Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. In 97, IDEA had a big change where it added 5 special factors that must be considered when developing that student's program. Okay, so, and what we're going to talk about is how assistive technology is one of those 5 special factors. So the idea is there are 5 things we need to talk about when we're developing this IEP in this meeting. In 2004, IDEA became aligned with the No Child Left Behind Act. And for a lot of us in education, we really did see a big shift in how needs and things were getting addressed, especially in our more self-contained units or our students with more significant needs, because with No Child Left Behind, there was really, this raising of standards for teachers, but also instruction. They really started to look a little bit. So as much as we all hate standardized testing, for a brief shiny moment, it looked like, oh, look, something useful is coming out of it, and that it's actually making sure that we're instructing our children. In 2017, there is Andrew F. versus the Douglas County School District. And this case, the Supreme Court emphasized the requirement that every child should have the chance to meet challenging objectives. So it wasn't just enough to say, oh, look, they're doing fine, they're doing well, right where they're at educationally, via this plan. This was really an opportunity for the courts to really make sure everybody was giving those students that opportunity to rise above what they were currently at. Okay, so now we've got to talk about the IEP. So that is the Individualized Education Program. Some people say plan, so you may hear it interchanged. So IDEA requires that an IEP for students receiving special education services, every student has to have an IEP. So once your student has been determined eligible to receive special education services, they will now be having an IEP as part of those services. So every year they need to be having a meeting. And that meeting is individualized to meet their specific needs and make progress towards their specific goals. So it's not, Susie has a learning disability, so these are the things that we do for our students with learning disability. It's really looking at specifically what Susie's strengths are, what her needs are, where she needs to go next. Throughout, I've listed the statutes where you can pull these up. And I'll make sure, I don't think I've linked them in the handout yet, so I will make sure that those get linked as well if those aren't in there, but I think they should all be linked properly in there. So now we want to talk about assistive technology services. So we know IDEA says every child needs to receive an IEP, and part of that IEP is going to include assistive technology services. So when we talk about assistive technology services as defined by IDEA, it means that any service that directly assists a child with a disability in the selection, acquisition, or use of an assistive technology device. Now, this can include determination of needs or an evaluation, providing the assistive technology device, maintaining the assistive technology device, working with the campus teams to determine the student needs of determine the AT needs of the student, as well as training the student, staff, and parents. So these all fall under assistive technology services. So we mentioned assistive technology device. So what is that? And that's always kind of a big one too, that we run into when we're talking with our teams. You know, what constitutes an AT device? When does it magically turn into AT? So assistive technology device means any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially or off the shelf, modified or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. And of course, the term does not include a medical device that is surgically implanted or the replacement of such device. So really with this definition is we are saying, you know, this can range from anything low tech to a pencil grip, to a raised surface, to lined paper, to anything that's high tech and specifically you know, created and modified, right? So we're looking at wheelchairs that have modified joysticks or mounting systems for their devices, you know, eye gaze on a laptop. You know, the range is far and wide. And really the idea is if the student doesn't have that assistive technology device, would they be successful in completing their task? And that's kind of really where that line helps to get drawn. Excuse me. So now that we know IEP happens every year, we know what assistive technology is. I like to talk about this one as well, because again, it's just to help remind people of the role of assistive technology and the role of staff in ensuring that. So one of the reasons why AT was added as a special factor is because they realized, you know, IDEA recognizes that AT is going to help students be successful, right? And we want to help bring up their or to help them achieve their goals and to help you know, meet those challenges. So if it's needed to be successful, and we want to ensure that students have access to a free and appropriate public education, right? That's one of the big things. You may hear people say the word FAPE, which is free and appropriate public education. So AT services are provided if needed to ensure that that student has a free and appropriate public education, regardless of their placement or the equipment needed. Okay, so what they're saying here is it doesn't matter what you know, eligibility coding your student has. It doesn't matter if they are in a general ed setting or in a more self-contained unit, or even the type of equipment. If that's what they need to be successful in their academic goals and to receive that free and appropriate public education, we need to make sure it's provided and at no extra cost to the parents, right? Like that's the whole point of a free and appropriate public education. And then second to that is if it's determined by the IEP team, school and district purchased equipment can be used at home or other settings if deemed necessary for that free and appropriate public education. And I bring that up because a lot of times I'll talk with other AT specialists or other teams and they get confused on, well, it's our device, but it's going home. And then I have to ask them, well, why would it need to go home? And, you know, if it's for communication, you know, are they going to use it to communicate to finish their homework? Well, yeah, they're going to need to finish their homework to complete their project to be successful in class. So therefore, they're going to need it to have FAPE. So it's always, again, going back to the purpose of things and helping to support those decisions. So we want to make sure people have that. All right, so to the big part, why we're all here, AT consideration. So I have quoted verbatim where you see the AT consideration listed in IDEA. So it, the line above it says, you know, all IEP meetings must, and then it says, consideration of special factors. The IEP team must consider whether the child needs assistive technology devices or services. That's what it says. It says you must consider those needs. So every single time you are having an IEP meeting, you need to be talking about the assistive technology needs and services. So, and it doesn't say that they need to have them. It means that you need to consider whether they need to have them. That leads us to our struggle. Why it's important. So first, let's talk about why is it important for us to talk about assistive technology in the IEP. So remember, the purpose of an IEP is to help a student with disabilities make annual gains in their educational journey, right? Gains. We want to see them increase skills. We want to see them be successful in their academic journey. So to do that, IEP teams need to ask, will the use of assistive technology increase, maintain, or improve a student's functional capability and help them make progress in those gains? Okay, so that's really the big thing here is if we're trying to help them make gains, are we providing all the tools and supports that they might need to make those gains? And then the other reason why it's really important to make sure that you're having these conversations is to really document the process. And I'll touch a little bit on this here and then we can talk about it later as we go on, but especially as more and more of our students are in inclusive settings and as more and more schools are doing things like one-to-one devices like Chromebooks and iPads, for a lot of campus teams, the lines are getting blurry on what is assistive technology versus instructional technology, and they're not properly documenting the actual needs of the student because they're saying, oh, well, everybody has a Chromebook now, so we don't need to write it in their paperwork. Forgetting that if that student leaves, what documentation is there to say, hey, this student needed that Chromebook, and if they go to a school that's not provided, there's nothing to make sure that that's going to be provided for them when they go to the next campus. And again, it just helps remind people, why are they actually using it? What is the purpose of it? Is it doing its job? So that's the other important reason for having this process. So why is AT consideration so difficult? We know it's important, we know it's useful. Why can't we seem to do it very effectively? Or where are we getting struggles from? Well, I showed you the line from IDEA. That's all the guidance they give us. They just say you have to consider it. They don't tell us who needs to be involved in that beyond what you previously read in terms of who's present in an IEP meeting. They don't tell you what you should say. They don't tell you how you should consider it. They just say you need to consider assistive technology. So for a lot of teams, they're going to get stuck because they don't know the questions to ask and they don't know if they've covered all their bases. And then the second point is for those teams that maybe want to have those conversations, a lot of times there is a perceived lack of knowledge or ability. You may have heard teachers say, well, I don't know anything about technology. I don't feel comfortable talking about it because that's not my wheelhouse. So I don't know how to make those recommendations. And that's not really what we're talking about with AT consideration. I think that's part of the problem when we look at AT consideration process is, again, people are trying to jump to the final decision, which sometimes you can get there very quickly. But really, that AT consideration process just needs to ask, have we thought about it? And what do we think the student might need? You don't need to come up with the answer right then and there. You just need to start having that conversation and taking those steps forward. And then the third point I put here is that assumption of financial burden. I've been in some campuses and talked with some other state, excuse me, some other teachers or AT specialists from different states, where when they're having these IEP meetings and they're talking about assistive technology, you can kind of feel in the room, right, that administrator that gets really nervous when you talk about assistive technology, because in their brains, they're automatically jumping to the most expensive piece of equipment that's out on the market, regardless of who the student is. So they just want to quickly brush over that part of the IEP as fast as possible because they just hope nobody notices it and they don't want anybody to ask for anything. And a lot of times, especially like I said, more and more of our classrooms have more equipment already provided to our students that might already be sufficient to meet our students' needs. Again, we just need to document it so that way it's part of that student's journey. A lot of times too, and I know we have I'm going to call you out, Kate, we have state agencies that, you're not having to make the commitment to buy the super piece of expensive equipment right then and there. You might make the decision, let's try something. And there are places where you can get that equipment to try it out and through different loan programs. So, that's another thing that we need to make sure that people are aware of. You're not having to make these financial decisions right then and there. It's having the conversation and starting the process. All right, so now we know the struggles. Let's talk about some best practices. So recommended best practices, and this is just, across different literature and things like that that we've read. IEP team or IEP development is a team process, right? And any good lawyer will tell you that IEP is not done until you all sign. And even then it's probably not done. But you've never completed an IEP document until everybody has agreed to it. So even if you draft everything, it's not done yet until everybody's had their say. So IEPs are a team process. So should the entire team be involved when considering assistive technology. Now, with that, we're not just talking about, SPED teachers and gen ed teachers and service providers, making sure the parents have input as well, making sure the students have input when considering assistive technology. And again, your student may not be sitting in the IEP meeting, but are you having that conversation? Are you getting some kind of input from your students in terms of what's effective, what they prefer using, things like that? The next point is everybody needs to recognize their role and their contributions. So again, with that whole team process, making sure that people don't feel like they're getting overburdened with something they don't feel comfortable doing. But a lot of times people don't recognize the valuable information that they can bring to the table to help make those decisions. So that's really where that second bullet point is coming in, is because, we know what it looks like in the classroom when the student's using something or struggling with a particular task, but the parent might be seeing something completely different, or they may see a strategy that's more beneficial. Or we may have a strategy that we think is going to work amazing in the classroom. And then the parent says, yeah, if we try to do that at the house, XYZ is not going to have, work out because of whatever. Because again, they're going to have information we don't about the student. And even for our student, even for our students that are may be nonverbal or have alternative methods of communication, they have information to share with us. The questions might be a little different than we would normally ask, our staff and our parents, but those students really need to make sure that their input is included as well. And then lastly, and this is really the kind of the crux of the matter, is there needs to be some kind of process, and staff need to understand how to complete that process. So typically, most of us, when we're looking at our IEP documentation, and it varies from state to state, even amongst different districts and states, when you're looking at that documentation, there just may be a little section that says special factors, and they say, assistive technology has been considered for the student, and then maybe there's a couple check boxes where it says, yes, the student will need assistive technology to make progress towards IEP goals, or no, student does not need assistive technology to be successful in completing their IEP goals. And then sometimes there'll be a third check mark that says more information is needed, and maybe they'll give you a little spot to add what specific information you need. Sometimes other districts have something that's more specific and drilled down. So maybe if you're checking yes, then they want you to be very specific about what that is. I think most, when they have like those yes and no's, they'll just give you like a little box to just type in some additional information. But that's all that's there. There's no instructions. And so what tends to happen is they just see those little check boxes and they'll just quickly say yes, or they'll just say no, based off of what was previously there or whatever their assumptions are, without actually having the conversation. So we just want to make sure that there is some kind of process happening. So I have several different tools and resources here that I'm going to kind of quickly walk through. So the first one is the Georgia Department of Education created this amazing document. And if you went to ATIA, I know they were kind of rolling it out and showing everybody this great project that they started called Take a Minute. And I'm just going to click on it and just briefly describe what's on the screen here. And then if you look at the handout, there is a visual description as well, where I give you more in-depth all the text that's on this document. So Take a Minute was created to really help teams stop. when they're going through their documentation, to literally stop and take a minute and talk about it. It's really just to have that brief conversation. So on the first side, of course, it's just explaining what that purpose is. And then on the second column of this first page, it's the 3 questions that they ask teams to have a conversation about. So the first one is asking, were there issues in the present levels that address how your student's disability affects his or her ability to be involved and progress in general education, right? Curriculum related to reading, writing, communication, or other areas. So, it's just a very nice, what are their present levels? What are we seeing that's impacting that? Once that's discussed, then you can say, will AT support in those deficit areas addressed in the present levels, right? So if we have a conversation and we say, Susie's struggling with reading, we think it might be decoding, but she seems to be comprehending very well, but we think she's just struggling with the decoding. Do we think AT could support that? Do we need to look at text to speech? And then the last one, because they made this as a part of their AIM initiative, or accessible educational materials, to bring awareness, to make sure that people are providing the access their students need to those alternative forms of text and media. Their third question is, can AIM, Braille, larger print, audio, or digital text, provide access so that the student can better comprehend the print or digital text? So with our example of Susie, we said, yes, Susie looks like she needs text to speech. So now we're talking about AIM too. Okay, so we need to make sure that we have digital text available for her. What I really, really, really like about this document is down at the bottom, it says it's okay not to know all the answers, right? You may get to one and you have to stop because you're not sure about what kind of AT is out there. That's fine. You started the discussion, you started the process. And it tells you, if you don't know all the answers, that's fine. Just document that discussion, select who's going to get those answers, and schedule your follow-up meeting. So again, it's just making sure that there's a process going on and it's ongoing. On the back side of this document, so they made it as a 2-page document that they could just hand out to different campuses. On the back side, what I really like about this, it goes back to that conversation about financial burden and not recognizing what you already have. What they've done is created a couple of tables to, again, kind of help generate some ideas and thoughts for teams. So on the left side, it says AT for students. And here it's just reminding them that, assistive technology can exist in everyday classrooms and be used by all, but it's going to be essential for some, right? So that's where it turns in from instructional to assistive. And so these are just some examples of that instructional technology, or UDL technology, that's really going to be essential and necessary for specific students based on their need. So here under reading, they listed if students are using any kind of text-to-speech extensions through Google, or maybe the immersive reader in Microsoft, right? That if that student needs it, it's turned into assistive technology, and we need to make sure that's getting documented. For writing, if students are using dictation, right, or speech to text or voice typing through Google, if that's how they're doing their work, we need to make sure that's getting documented. Spelling, right, spell check, word prediction. On the left side, or on the right side, it's talking about AIM for students. And this was kind of nice because a lot of times they were saying, yes, they need the formats, but they weren't realizing, and again, just to make sure that their documentation was complete, and making sure that if I have a student that's using refreshable Braille, which is, a digital way that you're going to get Braille onto something like a Braille note, that's requiring an extra piece of technology, right? So that assistive technology versus a hard copy of notes, right? If it's just a paper base that's large print, that's the accessible format. Do I need additional technology? Probably not, because it's just going to be a paper-based copy. So it's just, again, to help facilitate that documentation. And then at the very, very bottom here, I really like, again, that they're reminding them to think about the built-in accessibility features and hardware and software. More and more of our systems have those built-in accessibility features, right? We have VoiceOver, we have access. Oh, I just blanked on the name from Microsoft. The different accessibility tools that are available through those different OS systems. So just reminding people that those are already built in the system and just making sure it's getting documented in the IEP. So this next one comes from Ysleta, and that's where I used to work. So I'm really proud of this one. So I'm just going to sing its praises all day long. We created a placemat, and our conversation really came from, we know that teams were talking about assistive technology, but sometimes they weren't talking about all of the potential areas where assistive technology could be benefiting the student, or they were just writing down what was written before and not actually looking at if it was really still being effective for that student. So I'm just going to quickly read through these. So we have different tasks and areas over on the left side of the column. So we're looking at, reading, math, composing written material, writing aspects, and I'm going to jump around a little bit, communication, position, and seating. So all the different areas that we can typically consider for assistive technology. Then the next column says successful without AT. So the idea is you could quickly talk about each of these areas and almost just mentally, or if you wanted to print this out, check yes or no, right? Are they successful with reading without AT? Yes, right? And just yes, 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 no, 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 whatever it is. So down at the bottom, again, we did this to assist their documentation process. So for our documentation, if you say they don't need AT and they're successful without AT, then you're going to select no, student does not need AT. Then the next list is any current AT they are using. Okay, so let's talk about Susie. Maybe Susie's already using some kind of speech to text. Maybe that's something built in from whatever operating system. Maybe they're using something like Read and Write or Snap and Read, and we would list that. And we would go down the list, anything they're currently using. So then when we get to there, we say yes, they are using it, and we would indicate what they're using it for. Then the last one goes through anything that they're not successful, and maybe we need to add AT, or maybe we have AT, but it's not working out the way we want to, right? So maybe Susie has that text to speech, but we're not really seeing the progress we would like to, or it seems like there's some kind of difficulty. It could be that she just needs more training. Maybe it's not the right program for her. Maybe she needs something with some additional supports in there. But once you go through that list, then this is where you would check that yes, and more info is needed. And then we provide additional steps for them on what to do in terms of if they want a consultation or evaluation. And then down at the bottom, I can't click on it because I don't have access. We made it for district only. We had a little bit.ly link at the bottom of the document that would take them to different types of examples under those different areas. So under reading, we would have, from low tech to high tech, different types of supports for reading or assistive technology. When you're looking at the positioning and seating, again, from low to high tech, things from foot boxes to armrests to, power wheelchairs. So all of those things would be listed to, again, help generate some ideas and some thoughts for people. The next three that I have here are, they're a little more in depth and kind of make you walk through some extra steps, but that's okay too. That's why I wanted to give everybody a little bit of everything to kind of play around with. So of course we have the SET framework created by Joy Zabala, which is student environment, task, and tools. Now I've seen some districts use this as their consideration tool, and I've seen some districts use this as their evaluation tool. So I did want to provide that resource, and this is coming from the Richard West Assistive Technology Advocacy Center. I mean, really, you can just Google SET framework, and half the states have their own SET framework pages and things like that. So I just like this one because it did give a nice description of what each of those areas are. And then they also had some of those resource links, either specific trainings or some of the documentation. So that's why I put that one there. The next one is the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative. So if you go to that main page, they have a lot of resources that cover from consideration to evaluation, supports for transition, just a lot of great procedures and worksheets to help teams progress through. I did include their text-based consideration procedure. It gets really meaty in some of those questions and things to ask. And they talk about their consideration guide, and I did include that link as well. So if you're looking for something more text-based and meaty, that might be a good one to go to. And then the last one that I put in here is a link to the quality indicators for assistive technology. And this is a great resource. Over the years, it's just kind of this amazing organization, and the resources that they've produced really does help make sure, tools and strategies, but really a good check-in for your teams, for your districts, for your schools, to make sure that you're really providing quality services. And of course, their very, very first indicator is the consideration of assistive technology needs. So when you go to the website that I've linked here, you can either download it as a separate document, or you can go to their website. And their very, very first indicators is, are you considering it for all students, regardless of severity or type of disability? So again, reminding us, this is for every single student with an IEP. This isn't just for our kids who are blind or visually impaired. This isn't just for our kids with more significant physical needs, right? This is for every single student. If they have an IEP, we need to be considering. So these are just good questions to ask your team to make sure, it's a good way to check in and make sure that you're providing those quality services for your students. Okay, so I gave you a lot of information and a lot of things for you to explore, but I just really want to review quickly some of the takeaways that I really hope that you get out of today. Just remember, IDEA recognizes the important role that assistive technology can play in the student's ability to make progress and to achieve academic success. That's kind of the big thing. They believe in it. That's why they made it a special factor. That's why they want to make sure that you're looking at it for every single kid, because for a lot of our students, they're going to need assistive technology to make gains. Because remember, it's about making gains, not just staying static. For every other student, when we look at free and appropriate public education, it is to help them, gain knowledge and skills. Same thing for our students receiving IEP services. So the next thing to remember is every IEP is going to be individualized and needs to include the consideration for assistive technology, right? So again, making sure you're having that conversation for every single student and not just going, oh, well, they already have these things, so that's what we're giving them again. Stop for a second, talk about, well, what are they using? Is it working? Do we think there could be something else? It doesn't have to be a long conversation, but you really do need to make sure that you're looking at all the areas, all the factors. And then lastly, is it that AT consideration needs to be a process that teams understand and that they expect. And again, it doesn't have to be long, but there really needs to be within that culture of your IEP teams. We're going to have conversations about assistive technology for every single student. This is kind of how to expect how those conversations are going to happen. And that's why I gave you a chunk of resources to look at. I know for our district, we looked at WADI and we adjusted it for our specific needs. That was something that we said, well, we really like how they did this part, but we really want to tweak it to address our very, very specific documentation procedures. So that's why we, took that and adjusted a little bit. There might be another state or district that you run into in their processes and you say, this looks good, we just need to tweak a little bit to work for us. It's just making sure that you have a process and that teams know that that process is coming. Okay, so I'm going to do just a tiny plug. So this is the time while I make my plug to feel free to start jotting your questions in chat. So with Knowbility, in addition to having our wonderful Toolkit Tuesdays, and you know, these started because of COVID, and we wanted to make sure that parents and students had the access that they needed to, you know, really still be able to participate regardless of where they were. But we've seen this as an opportunity to expand upon that and not just be about COVID solutions and learning at home solutions. We wanted to make sure that parents really did have, you know, tools and access and understanding, as well as teachers and administrators to really make sure, are we looking at accessibility? Are we looking at assistive technology from all the angles? So in addition to that, we have a couple of things that might interest you. One is our ATSTAR, and that stands for Assistive Technology Strategies, Accommodations, and Resources. So some of you may be familiar with this. We've had it for years. It was designed as an 8-module course for all stakeholders in an IEP to have a better understanding of assistive technology and really how to gather that information needed to make effective recommendations. And what are the questions? A lot of times people want to jump to what is the tech, and this really hones in on what are the questions you need to ask. Because once you know the questions to ask, finding the tech is a lot less daunting, because you need to have the right questions to know where you need to go next. We do have a current version available, but we are working to update those materials soon. I still think it's useful information, but I will warn you, some of the videos are a little older. You know, we have some references to some throwback tech, you know, Alpha Smarts and things like that. But we are updating those materials soon. So just to let you know. And what we're going to do with that updated ATSTAR is kind of from there build our access toolkit. So, you know, we started with ATSTAR, and then what we want to do is start adding some additional training modules and really look at role-based learning paths. So instead of just having this 8-course module, like maybe you just need some a quick hit on some information about, you know, different types of text-to-speech readers. Maybe you need a quick resource on questions to ask when buying accessible materials, right? So that's where the access toolkit is going to come into play, is, you know, from the ATSTAR, and then also building additional resources and supports. And that's coming soon as well. And the reason why I mentioned those is because we are looking for schools or people that might be interested in helping to review that content, right? We want to make sure that this is useful, that it is going to be accessible, navigable, and engaging for the audience that we're preparing it for. So we do have a interest form if you'd like to fill out a quick Google form, just to let us know if you want to just, you know, help us review the content. If you are a school or a district that would be interested in completing the training modules and then helping us with some data collection, it won't be anything super stringent, I promise, but we just, again, we want to make sure that we're providing product that's useful and beneficial to people. Excuse me. So that bit.ly link is going to be bit.ly/K, the number 1, 2, or 12. And then we have interest form with a capital I and a capital F. And then I'm going to see if Molly can put that in the chat for me as well. So it's bit.ly/K12 interest form, and the K and the I and the F will be capitalized. All right, so we've come up to our question time. Oh, we've got plenty of time for questions. Great. I did want to just quickly mention, while I'm imagining somebody's furiously typing a question in chat, so I'll just talk while they form their question there. I did want to mention that I did include the AT3 website, and I know we have Kate here. I'm sorry, Kate, I just called you out again. She didn't know I was going to do that. But I did want to mention that because I think a lot of times, especially in school systems, I know I just moved recently, so I'm still kind of learning how my state and my schools provide different services. A place to start can always be your state Tech Act Center to get more information. But your state agencies can provide you with more info, maybe who to contact, but also they may be a place where you can get those loaner devices. And it really kind of depends on the agency. So I can't speak to every single state on what they have or what their procedures are. But that is always a good place to start if you're feeling a little lost and you're not sure where to go next. So All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. So I will go ahead and go to our next slide and advertise for our next Toolkit Tuesday. And I'm really excited about this one. It will be on March 1st. So if you haven't caught on, we're keeping our Toolkit Tuesdays the first Tuesday of every month. We'll keep them to this time at 1 p.m. Central. And in March, we are going to talk about the parent perspective. And what we're really hoping to do with this one is not just talk about parents' role in assistive technology, but again, looking at making learning accessible and inclusive, right? So one of the key stakeholders in that is our parents. So how are we helping to create inclusive and accessible spaces for our parents so that they can really engage and interact and contribute in that environment. So we'll be talking with some parents on that. So for that is bit.ly/Knowbility Toolkit Tuesday. Thank you, Molly. Right on time. Perfect. So thank you, everyone. I think that is it. If we don't have any questions, and if you had to jump in a little late, don't worry. We'll have this recorded, and then we'll pop it up onto the website, and any updates we need to make to the handout will happen as well. So thank you, everyone.